The New Zealand Baha'i community was overjoyed at being given the bounty of welcoming Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga, on two occasions in 1958 and in 1970. During his 9-day visit in 1958, he met with over 4,000 people in schools, public meetings, and special gatherings with the Maori, the indigenous Polynesian people of the land. One of the highlights was a visit to Rotorua, where Guide Ranji conducted his party through the thermal and sacred wonderlands, followed by a special invitation to visit the meeting house. Julie Raika, the grandniece of Guide Ranji, recently shared those precious memories with Enoch Olinga's daughter, Grace Olinga Manis.
Welcome to Hinamahi. Hinamahi was opened in 1927 and it was built for Guide Rangi by her grandfather. After looking at the photos, your father obviously was one of those many very important or VIP visitors that have come into the house, along with Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip and many others, and we'll go through the photo album later. But before we do that, I want to put on the cloak that your dad, the cloak that Guide Rangi actually put on your father when he was here 40 years ago, was it? Yeah. And my mother, who has since passed on into that world, that one eventually we all will, she was an expert at traditional weaving. It has been remodeled so that all the feathers are the same. It's just, yeah, it's gone into panels, and we've actually had two cloaks made out of it. So I'm going to dress you as your dad was dressed, wearing this cloak, holding this mere, and the taiaha. And this taiaha belonged to Guide Rangi's father. Okay, and that's a picture of him up in the photo. And I'm just wondering now whether you're feeling the same values within those things that your dad may have felt.
It's a very lovely feeling. Lovely on. I never dreamt I'd be here today doing this. Yeah, it's a real honor.
It's my pleasure, Grace, to be a part of it too.
To complete the historic meeting, Julie and Grace recreated the scene in front of the consecrated meeting house. Manu and Margaret Alai, longtime pioneers to New Zealand, escorted Grace through the sacred grounds just as they had 40 years ago with her father, Hand of the Cause, Enoch Olinga.
Why do you feel your father, Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, felt a need to come to New Zealand and, in his own words, to especially bring a proclamation of who Baha'u'llah is to the Maori people of this land, the indigenous people?
I don't really know if I can give that a full answer, but I know my father had the Pacific in his heart. He loved the Pacific, and I now pray that one day I would pioneer here, especially Samoa. And I believe, I don't know, he felt close to the Maori people, though he hadn't met them, and basically because they were the indigenous people of this country. He will be remembered for his big heart. He had a big heart. He will be remembered for his beautiful smile. He had a great sense of humor, and he enjoyed a good joke. He had a contagious laugh. He just yeah, he will be remembered for his generosity. I've heard people talk of him, of his kindness, of his love, and of his giving, and he was a giving person. There were 8 of us, 8 children that Dad had, but in Uganda, I think my father has educated, I don't know how many hundreds of children. He's been responsible for sending them to school, and people, they call him Papa Olinga.
On saying goodbye, the Baha'is of New Zealand realized the true meaning of love, humility, and devotion to Baha'u'llah, demonstrated by Enoch Olinga, the father of victories.
As a hand of the cause of God, Mr. Olinga continued to travel around the world for 20 years, inspiring the hearts on every continent and many islands.
In Samoa, we were with all our Samoan friends at the airport waiting for his plane to come in. They had built a beautiful ark of flowers, and it said, "Welcome Enochi." That's the way they say Enoch in their language. And as we waited, we started thinking about, Enoch, and we started to sing, Enoch Olinga, Enoch Olinga, Enoch Olinga, a hand of the cause. And all the Samoans joined in, and we worked on it for about 5 minutes. We had a whole song with the first two sections and a bridge, and then repeating back to the beginning. Gina helped supply words, and when he arrived, everybody sang that, and they were so overjoyed to see him, and he was so overjoyed he had tears in his eyes too.
One of my wonderful recollections of Enoch Olinga was when we were in Suva, and he was speaking at a meeting that was scheduled in a little village just outside Suva. And we had rented this very big hall, and as we arrived, the room was just packed with people. And all Enoch did was just walk into the room, and he smiled. He never said a word. And the next thing we knew, the people just stood up like they were one body, and they went wild. They screamed, and they shouted, and they cheered, and we just couldn't believe it. I actually found I had tears running down my face. I'm even moved now. It was such a moving experience.
When we heard of his coming, it was for the first time Hand of the Cause was visiting Trinidad and Tobago. It generated a lot of happiness, enthusiasm. Everybody was looking forward to see him. He was like very kind, very happy person in all occasions, never stopped laughing. Brought that happiness also generated to the Baha'i community. He was like a fire of love, could pay attention to everyone, old, young, children, make them happy. And with that great faith, when he recited the tablet of Ahmad, almost everybody felt it, that faith which he has in his heart.
Well, when I was in Haiti, and we did have an extremely delicate and difficult situation, the patience he showed, the love he showed, a little bit of humor too and all, in trying to help us to resolve the situation. Perhaps, you know, I guess I've seen that with most of our hands, because I've had the good fortune of meeting a number of the hands of the cause of God. And in difficult times, their love for the guardian, their love for Baha'u'llah, gave them something that we don't usually seem to have. And they were able to, I think all of them showed forth this love, this wisdom in protecting the cause and in helping us.
Well, I think my most happy experience as I pioneered was the visit I had with Enoch Olinga on a Easter weekend in Haiti, a Catholic country. We didn't know how many people would come or if any would come at all, but I had gone through the village all day and invited the people to come. And much to my surprise, they showed earlier than usual. They came before the time of the meeting, and by the time the meeting was to start, I had nearly 40 people there, which was really exciting. I had to translate him because the person who usually translates was not there. And I had to translate British English mentally to American English to French. And it was really fun because the people in the audience, knowing me, knew that I didn't know French very well, and so they helped translate, which was really fun, and had audience participation, many questions, a really lovely evening. And Enoch Olinga was just, you know, so gracious and wonderful, and It was such a blessing. And all I have to say is when you put your foot forward to help the cause of Baha'u'llah, the Supreme Concourse comes to your assistance. You don't need to doubt it. It is a guarantee.
I first met Hand of the Coals of God, Enoch Olinga, in 1976 in the American Virgin Islands. I had been reading day and night Baha'u'llah's words, Abdu'l-Baha's words, so many concepts of which I'd have to look up in the dictionary. One concept of which was radiant acquiescence, that I understood Hands of the Cause of God were endowed spiritually with great spiritual knowledge, spiritual energy, and I thought this is a great chance for me to ask this Hand of the Cause of God, say something about radiant acquiescence, which he did after first rolling his eyes to the heavens saying, you gotta help me with this one. But he told a story which I'll convey the essence here, that he had been at a public meeting, had talked about the Baha'i faith, the media, the press had been there, and a good time had been held by all but this one representative of the press who came toward him with great anger and agitation. He was furious about everything he'd heard, and Mr. Olinga said, I felt myself getting upset. This guy was right in my face and just so upset. So I realized at that moment, this is an angel that God has sent to me to test me. This is an angel. This man is an angel to test me. He said, I immediately recognized him as a gift to test me, and I started beaming with joy. He said, I was so happy. I reached out and gave him a wonderful warm hug. He said the rest of the evening he was so puzzled. He would just look at me and his mouth would be open, his eyes, but he was silent the rest of the evening. I was very happy, and I think that's the story I can tell you about radiant acquiescence.
During the time he was there, he also gave a talk at one of the large hotels. One of the final questions that came from the audience, I'll always remember because my background in communications. The question was, what's the most important thing in the family relationship? And he said, communication, communication, communication. And he just indicated that if you don't have good communication in a relationship, you won't have unity. And obviously that means come together with consultation at all times.
In addition to visiting individual communities, Enoch Olinga represented the Universal House of Justice at several intercontinental conferences, National Spiritual Assembly formations, and meeting heads of state in Asia, Europe, Central and South America, and Africa.
In February of 1977, my husband and I were privileged to attend an international conference, International Baha'i Conference, that was held in Mérida in the Yucatan. The conference was very exciting because there were people from so many backgrounds. There were so many Mayan Indians, for example. And of course, that's right in the heart of Mayan country. So it was an exciting and wonderful place to be at the time. And then more exciting than anything was the fact that Enoch Olinga came. He'd been in Brazil, and he came up from there to be at this conference. And he and Paul Haney were two of the leading Baha'is, Hands of the Causes, who were at the conference and more or less conducted it and spoke frequently and all. And it was a very enchanting time for all of us there.
My closest contact with Hand of the Cause of God, Enoch Olinga, and his wife, Elizabeth, was at the international conference held in Mexico, Mérida, Mexico. That was one of the 8 international conferences designated by the Universal House of Justice for 1976 and 1977. I was planning on remaining in Latin America for a short while after the conference, and Mr. and Mrs. Olinga were also planning to journey to some of the countries, and we were able to arrange to have me go with them.
And we went to Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Panama, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. Mr. Olinga had a wonderful personality. He was joyful, always inspiring, and his wife was very gracious and queenly. What impressed me so much was that whenever he would talk at any place, he would always introduce his wife and have her say something. And he would introduce me too and have me say a few words. It was being like in the presence of two angels.
We had a conference in Nairobi, and then there was over 1,800 friends was attended from different parts of the world, and especially from Iran. And then whenever this conference or other conferences was holding, he was introducing, always calling the pioneers to come up on stage and introducing each and every one of them to the audience, and was asking, you can say a few words to the friends and you explain your experience about your pioneering, about your service to Baha'u'llah, so will be the cause of the encouragement to the others. Whenever he met the friends, he was in a very jovial atmosphere and he was very happy, and the way he was talking, that is makes everybody happy. And this is a character that is we Baha'is we must do. That is we believe in Baha'u'llah, we have got the blessing and bounty of Baha'u'llah in our heart, in our soul. So we must be every moment of life in this world to be happy and make happy the others.
During that time of the Palermo Journey Conference, it was, as you know, the centenary of Baha'u'llah's journey to Accra. And we actually went along the journey, and Dr. Jerry Carey and Mr. Sears would tell us what took place in the various ports and what have you. As we arrived, I met Hand of the Cause Enoch Olinga and his wife Elizabeth, who we became instant lovers, instantly, because Elizabeth was such a glow. She was such a warm human being. She pulled off her head tie and she came over to me. She said, here, I want you to wear this. It was a little red and gold head tie. She said, you wear this because you are an African sister. Mr. Sears and Mr. Olinga encouraged me to pioneer. Well, at the time I had a daughter. I'd lost my husband and I was raising this daughter alone. And they encouraged me to pioneer. Well, I couldn't see how I could ever pioneer because here I'm struggling, working and what have you. And they said, don't worry, you will pioneer. I had a chance to pioneer, of course, to Liberia, West Africa. Mr. Olinga was always encouraging. He kept in touch. Elizabeth continuously kept in touch with me, wanting to know how we were doing. The one thing I remember about Mr. Olinga was his love, his humility, and his talk always about the Holy Spirit. Even though we are separated, that the Holy Spirit, the bonds and ties of the soul, the spiritual ties are always there. This was some saying of the masters. And he said that no matter what takes place in this world, we are children of God and that He loves us. We must strive to become nearer and closer at all times to Baha'u'llah. We must bring Him close to us and keep Him with us.
Eventually, the Olinga family returned to live in his native village of Tiling, where he built a home for the family. This refuge away from his many commitments may well have assisted him in overcoming the enormous difficulties he experienced and challenges yet to face him.
As Enoch Olinga is the hand of the cause who came from Tiling, Kobuin, Kumi district, his impact in the faith is very great. When he went to West Africa, he came back and made a lot of gatherings and a lot of conferences in Tiling, whereby enrollment of the Baha'is was very great. He was eager to call children together and chat with them. He wanted children to be around him And that's why he even started, initiated a school, a Sunday school in Tiling.
I got to know hand of the coast, Mr. Olinga, whom we adopted the name as hand of the coast, Papa Olinga, when I was still a very, very young child of about 8 years. We got so attracted to Papa Olinga because of the love and the unity he had with our family. In fact, we never got to know that they are not related till very late. They were so united that we had to call him Papa Olinga, the brother of Papa. And you know, the love he had for the community where I grew from was so unique that it has been my prayer always that such unity and love develops among all the communities and the Baha'is.
الله حفا در سالهای حدود 1972 جناب اولینگا به تهران تشریف آوردند.
In the early 1970s, Honorable Olinga visited Iran, the birthplace of Baha'u'llah. It was in Tehran. I was about 16 years old and remember vividly the gathering was like a fountain of people flowing around him to the point that there was no room for a pin to drop. His talks were close to our hearts and unforgettable because he foretold of future events that we have now seen with our own eyes. I remember wherever he traveled, there were many friends circling around him, and by saying Allah Abha and greetings would express their utmost joy.
After Hand of the Cause of God Enoch Olinga's visit to Iran, the Friends in Europe in 1970 had the joy of seeing him and Elizabeth at the House of Worship. In Germany, where he said a prayer in his native language.
The Baha'is of Canada and the United States were deeply blessed by the visit of Hand of the Cause of Enoch Olinga, from the east to the west coast, to the deep south, and finally north to the Mother Temple of the West.
I grew up in a very segregated southern community. I didn't go to school with anyone of color. Not even high school or college. So my experience was very limited. But when I met Enoch Olinga, he opened up a new world to me of what color did or didn't mean, what spirit meant, what love meant. He was such a beautiful example of what I think God was talking about when he said, I made man in my own image. He embodied to me what spirituality was. His loving, gentle, intellectual abilities radiated to everyone. He was very impressive. I think the South now still vibrates from what he had to say and what his presence did to that community. There are a lot of Baha'is there who are still very active and have very vivid memories of his visit.
I knew that he was a tribal person and that I'm a tribal person, and I knew that he would know things that could benefit me knowing. You know, I wanted a validation of our traditional religious beliefs, that they were from the Creator, you know, that they were in truth. I said, you know, we believe that there have been several manifestations of God who have appeared here in the Americas to our ancestors, and he smiled. He said, yes, that's true. He said, you know, but a lot of people don't understand. He says there's been more than 20,000 of these manifestations of God. And I just looked at him and I was like, and he was off, looking kind of like he was seeing something in another world, and he was just relating this to me. And then he came back and he looked at me and he smiled, and he just leaned forward like that, and he put his forehead against my forehead, and we just stood there for a long time. I mean, it could have been an eternity. It was really a long time. And he just looked at me and he said, you know, He said, we'll meet again.
It's always been of particular interest to me how Enoch Olinga and Louis Gregory related to each other in terms of their station and their missions in life. The founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, in his teachings uses as one of the cornerstones of his revelation the equality of all human beings. In the United States in particular, where racism had actually become institutionalized, the Baha'is have always felt that the elimination of prejudices and the equality of the races had to be one of the first areas that we concentrated on in teaching the Baha'i faith. And to that end, one of the most significant examples was Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, had a particular mission for Louis Gregory in developing certain aspects of the teachings of Baha'u'llah to the Western world, particularly the early American community. And of course, as we know, Louis Gregory, after his passing, his spiritual station was elevated to that of Hand of the Cause of God, which is a very significant and honored station to hold. As I grew up in the faith, and as time went on, and the guardian, Shoghi Effendi, became the head of the faith and began to appoint other hands of the cause, these particular souls who were his right and left hand, as it were. During that early period of his administration, opening up the whole continent of Africa to the faith. And there arose amongst the early believers in Africa a young man, a very humble background, whose name was Enoch Olinga. And a man who became so inspired, so committed to the principles of the Baha'i faith and the spirit of his own development with God, became such a giant in the teaching field in Africa that Shoghi Effendi gave him the rank of Hand of the Cause of God.
On my first trip to the house of worship from Florida, I met Enoch Olinga. He was such a powerful man. And even though he didn't speak to me directly, what he said was to all the people who live close to the land and who are of color: be strong, be real, and keep up your hope. Pray daily. Pray, 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 and your answers will come through prayer.
Beloved friends, I am very happy indeed to be here this evening, and I do hope that you too are happy. Are you happy? Yes. Are you really happy? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. The Baha'is are very fortunate in that they are alive in these days and have been enabled by Baha'u'llah himself to recognize him who is the Lord of this day. And that's why Baha'is should be happy always. It is not possible, the beloved guardian explained, it is not possible for anyone in the world to be happy without God. We must know God first. We must know God. And when we know Him, then we are expected to love Him with all our hearts. No wonder Baha'u'llah himself the supreme manifestation of God has said that the first duty prescribed upon the people of the world, only one duty, and that is to recognize the manifestation of God for their day. The beloved guardian said, anyone in Africa living in a small village and unable to read or write, but believes that Baha'u'llah is the manifestation of God for today, that Baha'i in that African village occupies a very high station, a very high position in the eyes of God. He said, of all the gifts which God has given mankind, the greatest, including love, wisdom, knowledge, and other merciful qualities, the greatest is the gift of teaching the Baha'i faith. There are many Baha'is in the world. They are not aware of Baha'u'llah. That's what. Find them. That's the first thing to know. And when we are sincere, then we shall be led to them. He said, first, believe in Baha'u'llah and surrender your will in favor of the divine will. Love Baha'u'llah with all your heart. Trust in him and have confidence in him, and go out believing that he is with you and he will guide you to the right people.